A black CEO is denied entry at a luxury hotel. 24 hours later, he buys the entire building, leaving the now speechless owner in shock. Before we begin, leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. Aiden smiled, a polite, practiced gesture, as he stepped out of the sleek black car. The air, crisp and biting, carried the scent of pine and fresh snow. He was in the Swiss Alps, a world away from the controlled chaos of his Silicon Valley headquarters, and he was here on a mission. The Grand Alpenglow stood before him, a magnificent structure of glass, steel, and dark timber, its design a perfect marriage of alpine tradition and modern elegance. Sunlight glinted off the vast windows, and the sound of distant sleigh bells mixed with the low hum of luxury cars. Aiden, CEO of a groundbreaking tech firm, was here to meet with a potential investor, a notoriously private and old-fashioned individual who had insisted on this remote, opulent setting. Aiden's suit, a bespoke piece of midnight blue fabric, was a testament to his success. His leather shoes were polished to a mirror shine, and his watch, a gift from his team after their first major IPO, was discreet but valuable. He felt prepared, confident, and entirely in his element. He walked with a purpose that had carried him from a small startup garage to the helm of a billion-dollar company. As he reached the entrance, a man in a stiff, tailored uniform stepped forward. He was tall, with a stern face and a posture that radiated authority. His name tag read Matthias, head of security. "I'm sorry, sir," Matthias said, his voice clipped and dismissive. "There must be a mistake. We do not permit non-guests on the premises. Our policy is very strict." Aiden's smile faltered, replaced by a slight frown of confusion. "I believe there is a mistake. I have a 2 p.m. meeting with Mr. Julian Voss. I was told to meet him in the lobby lounge." Matthias's eyes flickered over Aiden, a quick, dismissive survey. "I'm afraid I have no record of that meeting. Furthermore, your attire is not appropriate for our establishment. I'll have to ask you to leave." Aiden looked down at his perfectly tailored suit. It was the same suit he wore to board meetings, to media appearances, and to high-stakes negotiations. It was the uniform of a man who commanded respect. The accusation of inappropriate attire was absurd. He felt a slow, simmering burn of indignation begin to rise. "What exactly is inappropriate about this?" Aiden asked, his voice low and controlled. Matthias's expression didn't change. "Our dress code for visitors is formal evening wear. Your current style does not meet our standards. I must insist that you vacate the premises." The lie was transparent. There was no mention of a formal dress code for a casual afternoon meeting on the email from Julian Voss's assistant. This wasn't about a dress code. This was about something else entirely, something that Aiden had encountered before, but never in a place that marketed itself as a beacon of modern luxury. He was a successful, powerful man, and yet, here he was, being judged and dismissed based on preconceived notions, not on who he was or what he had accomplished. Aiden took a deep breath, fighting the urge to let his frustration show. He reached for his phone, pulling up the email confirmation. "I can show you the correspondence with Mr. Voss's office. I am Aiden Thorne, CEO of Nexus Tech." Matthias didn't even glance at the phone. He took a single step forward, a nonverbal signal of dismissal. "We're a private hotel, Mr. Thorne. I'm sure you can find another establishment that is more accommodating." The word hung in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. Aiden stood his ground for a moment longer, the cold of the Alps seeming to seep into his bones. The humiliation was a physical thing, a tight knot in his stomach. He was a man who had built an empire from nothing, who had overcome every obstacle thrown in his path. But he couldn't fight an invisible barrier of bias and prejudice that was older than this grand hotel itself. The fight wasn't worth the energy. He finally turned and walked back to his car, the driver's face a mask of silent sympathy. He didn't get in. He simply stood by the open door, watching as a procession of guests, all of them white, all of them seemingly welcome, passed through the very same doors he had been barred from. The injustice of it all settled deep within him. It wasn't just about a missed meeting or a rude security guard. It was a reminder that no matter how much you achieve, some walls refuse to come down. He pulled out his laptop, a sleek, minimalist device that held the keys to his world. The sting of the rejection was still fresh, but it was being rapidly replaced by a cold, calculated resolve. He was no longer thinking about a missed business opportunity. He was thinking about a statement. A very expensive statement. He began to type an email to his CFO, Kenji, his fingers flying over the keyboard with a newfound intensity. The subject line was simply, "The Grand Alpenglow." The first sentence was a command, not a request. "Kenji, I want to know everything about that hotel." Everything. Aiden retreated to a small, unassuming cafe a few blocks from the glittering facade of the Grand Alpenglow. He chose a corner table, a place where he could sit with his back to the wall and watch the world go by, feeling both a part of it and completely separate. The aroma of roasted coffee and warm pastries filled the air, a stark contrast to the cold dismissal he had just faced. The sting of the rejection was a fresh wound, but it was already starting to scar over, hardening into a resolve that he knew was more powerful than any fleeting anger. He pulled his laptop from his messenger bag, the familiar way to comfort. He didn't open it to reschedule his meeting with Julian Voss. That was now a non-priority. He had a new agenda. His fingers, which had built algorithms and coded future-defining software, now hovered over the keyboard with a singular focus. He opened a new email, the cursor blinking patiently on the blank screen. The recipient was Kenji Tanaka, his CFO and a trusted friend who had been with him since the company's inception. Kenji was a numbers man, a pragmatic soul who saw the world in spreadsheets and risk assessments. He was the ballast to Aiden's more impulsive, visionary side. The subject line was simply, "The Grand Alpenglow." It was a title that was both a statement of intent and a question, a call to action that Kenji would immediately understand. The body of the email was short, almost brutally so, but it contained a universe of meaning. "Kenji," Aiden began, a single word that carried their long history and a foundation of mutual trust. "What's our current liquid capital? Give me the hard number, down to the last cent. I want to know exactly what we can access without touching our core investments or triggering a shareholder panic." He paused, a flicker of a smile on his face. He could almost hear Kenji's sigh of exasperation through the digital ether. But he knew Kenji would do it. No questions asked, at least not yet. "Next, I need a full financial assessment of the Grand Alpenglow. I want to know everything. Their debt-to-equity ratio. Their revenue streams, not just rooms, but events, restaurants, everything. Their last 5 years of profit and loss statements. I want to know who owns them. A full breakdown of the parent company's assets and liabilities. Give me a number. The highest number it would take to buy them. And a realistic number we could get it for." Aiden reread the email. It was audacious, bordering on insane. His company, Nexus Tech, was a tech giant, not a real estate holding company. They built platforms, not properties. But this was no longer about business diversification. It was about something far more personal. He added a final, critical line. "Treat this with the highest level of urgency. This isn't a long-term project. I want this data within the next 12 hours. And Kenji, this is off the books for now. Don't tell the board." He hit send and watched the message disappear into the digital abyss, a silent declaration of war. He knew he was asking Kenji to move mountains, to tap into resources and networks that were usually reserved for multi-billion-dollar acquisitions. But he also knew Kenji would do it. Their partnership was built on an unspoken understanding. Aiden's vision, no matter how wild, was almost always grounded in a deeper, more profound purpose. As he closed his laptop, Aiden felt a sense of calm. The humiliation had been a fleeting sensation, a spark that had ignited a fire within him. He was no longer the man who had been turned away. He was the man who was about to turn the tables. He bought a coffee, black and bitter, just the way he liked it, and watched as people walked past the cafe window, unaware that just a few blocks away, a quiet act of defiance was set to shake the foundations of an old-world institution. The rejection at the hotel door was not a closed path. It was a new beginning. The phone rang at 5 a.m. on Kenji Tanaka's end, a jarring intrusion into the pre-dawn quiet of his Tokyo apartment. He squinted at the screen, seeing Aiden's name flash, and knew instantly that this wasn't a casual check-in. Aiden only called at this hour when an idea, a big one, had taken hold and refused to let go. Kenji answered, his voice thick with sleep. "Aiden, it's the middle of the night here. I hope you're not calling to tell me you've decided to launch a satellite from your backyard." Aiden's voice on the other end was sharp, wide awake, and filled with a nervous energy that Kenji knew well. Close enough, Kenji. Did you get my email? I did. Kenji sighed, rubbing his temples. He had read it a few hours ago. The blunt commands a strange and unsettling departure from their usual collaboration. And yes, I've already set the teams in motion. But Aiden, seriously? The numbers are significant. You're talking about a real estate empire, not a tech acquisition. The Grand Alpenglow isn't just a building. It's a global landmark. It's an institution. We could buy a small island for this price, and probably a nicer one. It's not about the price, Kenji, Aiden replied, his voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. It's about a principle. What did your people find? Give me the summary. Kenji clicked a few keys on his laptop, a familiar sound even across continents. All right. The Grand Alpenglow is owned by a holding company called Alpine Heritage Group. They're a Swiss conglomerate, old money, with a portfolio of luxury hotels and resorts. They're not distressed. No debt to speak of. They're a cash cow. It's a pride holding, something they've owned for generations. They won't want to sell. Everyone has a price, Aiden interjected, a cold edge to his voice. Their price would be astronomical, Aiden. We're talking about an offer so high it would be insulting. They'd see it as a hostile takeover attempt. This isn't like buying a competitor's struggling tech firm. This is personal for them. Good, Aiden said, a note of grim satisfaction in his tone. That makes two of us. He was silent for a moment, and Kenji could practically feel the gears turning in his friend's mind. What's the valuation? What would be an offer they couldn't possibly refuse? Kenji had anticipated this question. My team came up with a number based on their current market value, plus a premium of, well, a very generous premium. It's an overpayment, Aiden. A gross overpayment. It would take a huge chunk of our liquid capital, and the board would go ballistic. We'd have to liquidate some assets, sell off some stocks. It would be a major move, not just a simple purchase. Then do it, Aiden said simply. Kenji was stunned into silence. He had expected a debate, a negotiation, a long-winded explanation. He had prepared spreadsheets, graphs, and a dozen different arguments on why this was a terrible idea. But Aiden's tone was final, the decision made. Aiden, with all due respect, I need you to understand what you're saying here, Kenji said, his voice now serious and concerned. This isn't a game. It's not a joke. It's a multi-billion-dollar transaction that has nothing to do with our core business. It's going to raise serious questions. Investors will panic. The press will have a field day. Are you absolutely certain you want to do this? I am, Aiden responded, his voice unwavering. Find out who owns it. Find out what they want. Then, make them an offer they can't refuse. And if they refuse it, add another 10%. And then another 10% after that. I don't care what the number is. I want that hotel. There was a long pause on the line. Kenji finally let out a long sigh, the sound a mix of defeat and grudging admiration. He knew Aiden well enough to know that when he got this focused, there was no stopping him. This wasn't about a hotel. It was about something that had happened to his friend, something that had lit a fire under him. He wasn't sure what it was, but he knew it was powerful. All right, Aiden, Kenji said, his professional composure returning. The teams are already on it. I'll have the full report by the end of the day. But you owe me an explanation, the full story, and a very large coffee. You'll get both, Aiden promised. And Kenji? Thank you. I know this is crazy, but it's important. More important than you can imagine right now. He hung up the phone, a strange feeling of calm settling over him. He had set the wheels in motion. Now all he had to do was wait. Aiden called the emergency board meeting for 6 p.m. Pacific time, a deliberate hour chosen to ensure all members, from Tokyo to London, were either at their desks or easily accessible. The virtual room filled with faces that represented the pinnacle of business acumen and strategic foresight. There was Sarah Chun, the company's brilliant chief technology officer, David Grant, the grizzled and skeptical head of product, and Michael Thorne, Aiden's younger brother and the company's legal counsel, a man who believed in order and process above all else. At the center of the screen, Kenji appeared, his expression a mix of professional neutrality and personal concern. Aiden began without preamble. Thank you all for joining on such short notice. I've called this meeting to discuss a new strategic direction for the company. It's a bold move, and I won't pretend it's a conventional one. I have asked Kenji to provide a financial overview of a potential acquisition. Kenji took over, his voice a calm, steady counterpoint to Aiden's intense energy. He projected a detailed slide deck onto the screen, outlining the financial profile of Alpine Heritage Group and the Grand Alpenglow. The numbers were staggering. Kenji laid out the cost of the proposed acquisition, the overpayment premium, and the potential impact on Nexus Tech's liquid assets. He presented the risks, the drain on capital, the potential for shareholder dissent, and the complete lack of synergy with their core business. A tense silence fell over the virtual room as Kenji finished his presentation. David Grant was the first to speak, his voice laced with incredulity. Aiden, with all due respect, what in the world are we doing? We're a tech company. We innovate, we build, we disrupt. We do not buy hotels in the Swiss Alps. This is an enormous, unprecedented risk with no clear return on investment. You're talking about taking billions of dollars that could be used for R&D, for expanding into new markets, and you're sinking it into real estate? Is this a joke? Sarah Chun, always more measured, chimed in. I have to agree with David. This doesn't align with our mission statement or our long-term strategic plan. It's a diversion of resources. We have a moral obligation to our shareholders to maximize their investment, not to fund personal passion projects, no matter how grand. The word personal hung in the air, a thinly veiled accusation. Aiden's brother, Michael, weighed in next. From a legal and regulatory standpoint, this is a nightmare. The due diligence would be extensive, and the optics, frankly, they're terrible. The press will have a field day. We'll be seen as an impulsive, unstable company. It will be bad for our brand and bad for our stock price. The room was a chorus of dissent. Every single board member, save for Kenji who remained silent, was against the idea. They saw it as reckless, foolish, and a betrayal of their corporate identity. Aiden listened patiently, his face betraying nothing of the storm of emotion inside him. He had anticipated this. He had prepared for it. He took a deep breath and addressed the board, not as their CEO, but as a man with a message. You're all right, he began, his voice calm and surprisingly low. The board members leaned in, surprised by his capitulation. On paper, this makes no sense. It's an insane financial risk. It doesn't fit our business model, and it will be a PR headache. But you're all missing the point. He paused, letting his words sink in. He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes meeting each person's on the screen. This isn't about property. It's about making a statement. It's about showing that success and power aren't defined by outdated, biased rules. Yesterday, I was denied entry to that hotel. Not because I wasn't a guest, but because the head of security decided my attire was inappropriate. That's a lie. He looked at me, a black man, and decided I didn't belong in his luxury establishment. He saw a stereotype, not a CEO. The room was silent. The air crackled with the gravity of his words. This wasn't a business transaction, it was a crusade. This is about proving that the people who build the future won't be held back by the past. That the old guard, with their exclusive clubs and their biased rules, can't stop the new guard from taking their place at the table. We built this company on the principle of breaking down barriers. We built a platform that gives everyone a voice. Now, we have a chance to show the world that we live by those principles, not just talk about them. We can buy that building. We can tear down their velvet rope and show them what true luxury is, not exclusivity, but inclusivity. He leaned back, his plea complete. He had laid his soul bare, revealing the deeply personal wound that had driven him to this decision. David Grant, who had been the most vocal opponent, looked away from the screen, a thoughtful expression on his face. Sarah Chun seemed to soften, the business-minded woman replaced by a colleague who finally understood. Michael Thorne, his brother, nodded slowly, a silent sign of support. We have the capital, Aiden concluded, his voice ringing with conviction. We have the resources. We have the vision. The question isn't whether this is a good business decision. The question is, who are we? Are we just another tech company making money? Or are we a company with a purpose? Do we want to be part of the future we're building? Or are we just going to sit back and watch it happen? I say we act. One by one, the board members voted. The decision was no longer based on cold hard facts and financial projections. It was based on a moral conviction, on a shared belief in the power of their mission. In the end, the vote was unanimous. The board had been won over, not by a spreadsheet, but by a story. Aiden had made his case, and now the path was clear. The Grand Alpenglow was about to be changed forever. The fax machine in Aiden's office whirred to life, spitting out a single sheet of paper. It was from the Alpine Heritage Group, the conglomerate that owned the Grand Alpenglow. The tone was formal, curt, and dismissive. They had received Nexus Tech's initial offer. The word preposterous was used, as was insulting. The fax concluded with a firm, not for sale. Aiden crumpled the paper and tossed it into the recycling bin. He was not surprised. This was precisely the kind of arrogance he had expected. He turned to Kenji, who was sitting across the table, laptop open. "Their move," Aiden said. "Now it's our turn. Make another offer. Add another 10% to the initial number." Kenji raised an eyebrow. "Aiden, we're already offering an absurd amount. Another 10% on top of that is going to raise some serious flags. It's a hostile maneuver. They'll know we're not just trying to buy a hotel. We're trying to prove a point." "Exactly," Aiden said, a cold smile on his face. Let them see that we're not going away. Let them see that we have the capital, the resolve, and the audacity to do this. This isn't a negotiation, it's a statement. And the statement is, you can't have a price on your pride." The new offer was sent. It was met with an immediate, furious response. This time, a phone call from Ms. Du Bois, the stern, elegant CEO of Alpine Heritage Group herself. She didn't mince words. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her accent thick with disdain, "I don't know who you are or what your game is, but we are not for sale. We are an institution. We have been in business for generations. We will not be bullied by some upstart technology company with a mountain of cash." Aiden remained calm. "Ms. Du Bois, I'm simply trying to make a deal. I'm a serious buyer with a serious offer. Your hotel is an exceptional property. I simply want to be its next owner." "And why?" she shot back. "We both know this is not a sound investment for a tech company. Why are you so fixated on this one building?" Aiden didn't answer her directly. "My reasons are my own, Ms. Du Bois. But my money is real, and it's on the table. Take it, or I'll add another 10%. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Ms. Du Bois, a woman accustomed to having the final word, was taken aback. She ended the call, leaving Aiden with a sense of triumph. He knew he had gotten under her skin. For the next 48 hours, the exchange continued. Each time Alpine Heritage Group refused, Aiden's team, led by a relentless Kenji, would come back with a higher offer. The numbers climbed to astronomical figures, far exceeding the hotel's market value. The press, catching wind of the bizarre bidding war, began to speculate wildly. Nexus Tech CEO bids to buy Swiss hotel, read one headline. Is it a real estate play or a PR stunt? Read another. Finally, a week after Aiden's first email to Kenji, the Swiss conglomerate capitulated. The pressure from their shareholders, who saw the ever-increasing offer as an insane, but incredibly profitable, lifeline, had become too much to bear. The deal was contingent on a single meeting, a final conversation between the seller and the buyer. They wanted to see the man who was willing to pay a king's ransom for their pride and joy. Ms. Du Bois's assistant called Aiden's office. "Ms. Du Bois will meet you tomorrow at 2 p.m., she said, her voice still frosty. "At the Grand Alpenglow." The words were meant to be a final power play, a gesture of control. They wanted Aiden to walk through their doors, a final acknowledgement of their superiority. Aiden simply smiled. "I'll be there," he said. He knew that this wasn't just a meeting. It was a victory lap. Aiden returned to the Grand Alpenglow 24 hours after his initial rejection. The day was colder, the sky a gunmetal gray that promised snow. He chose not to wear a suit. Instead, he opted for a simple, but impeccably tailored, black wool sweater, dark jeans, and his most comfortable pair of sneakers. His attire was a silent statement, a deliberate dismissal of the arbitrary dress code that had been used to bar him. This was not a business meeting in the traditional sense. It was a reclamation. He stepped out of the car and walked with a steady, unhurried pace toward the hotel's grand entrance. The same security guard, Matthias, was standing at the door. His posture was just as rigid, his expression just as stern. He seemed to recognize Aiden instantly, a flicker of confusion crossing his face before it quickly hardened back into a mask of professional dismissal. "Sir, I'm sorry, but as I told you yesterday, we do not permit non-guests on the premises," Matthias began, his hand already starting to rise in a familiar, blocking gesture. "I'll have to ask you to." Aiden didn't break his stride. He simply continued to walk, his eyes fixed on the doors ahead. His silence was a new kind of power. He was no longer a man asking for permission. He was a man asserting his right to be there. He walked right past Matthias, so close their shoulders almost brushed. The security guard froze, his hands still suspended in the air. He had been trained to handle a confrontation, to physically bar someone if necessary. But he hadn't been trained for a person who simply walked through his personal barrier as if it didn't exist. Aiden didn't stop at the lobby. He knew where he was going. He walked directly to the private elevators that led to the executive suites, his footsteps a quiet echo in the hushed elegance of the lobby. Matthias, finally recovering from his shock, began to follow, a look of panic on his face. "Sir, you cannot be in this area." "Sir." Aiden ignored him. The elevator doors opened, and he stepped inside, pressing the button for the penthouse floor. Matthias reached the elevator bank just as the doors were closing, his face a mixture of disbelief and fury. He barked into his radio, his voice a frantic whisper. "Intruder on the executive elevator. Penthouse floor. I repeat, we have an intruder." Upstairs, Ms. Dubois was waiting. She was standing in the center of the lavishly appointed room, a portrait of Swiss precision and confidence. She watched as the elevator doors slid open and a man in jeans and a sweater stepped out. Her eyebrows rose in a silent query. This was not the man she had expected. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice a cool blade of steel. "I must say, your attire is surprising." "I find it quite comfortable, Ms. Dubois," Aiden replied, a small, knowing smile on his face. He walked into the room and took a seat on a plush sofa without being offered one. He was already acting like he owned the place. Ms. Dubois's face tightened. She was not accustomed to such a blatant disregard for decorum. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries, Mr. Thorne. Why are you so insistent on buying this hotel? We both know this is a fool's errand. A man of your acumen doesn't simply throw money away for a whim." "It's not a whim," Aiden said, looking her directly in the eye. "It's a correction. You see, yesterday, one of your employees made a judgment call that was based on something other than my qualifications. He decided, based on my appearance, that I didn't belong here. He was wrong, and I'm here to correct his mistake. I'm here to show him, and you, that I don't just belong here. I own it." Ms. Dubois's professional composure finally cracked. She let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You're telling me you are spending billions of dollars because you were denied entry to my hotel?" "I am," Aiden confirmed, his voice calm and firm. "Because when a system is broken, you don't complain about it. You change it. And I have the resources to change this one. So, let's sign the papers, Ms. Dubois. The quicker we do this, the quicker I can begin correcting the mistakes your company has been making for generations." The audaciousness of his statement left her speechless. She had seen a lot of powerful people, but she had never met anyone who would take such a monumental, public, and expensive stand on a matter of principle. She looked at the man in the sweater and saw not just a buyer, but a force of nature. She pointed to a set of documents on a glass table. "The terms are all there, Mr. Thorne. I suggest you have your legal team look them over before you make the most regrettable decision of your career." Aiden picked up the papers and glanced at the final page. The number was eye-watering, even for him. He pulled out a pen, not even bothering to read the fine print. "I trust my legal counsel," he said, and with a single stroke of the pen, he signed his name. The act was swift and final. He was a man who had built an empire from a whisper of an idea, and now he was buying a legacy with the same quiet confidence. He had not just returned to the Grand Alpenglow. He had conquered it. Aiden watched Ms. Dubois's face, a silent study in controlled fury. She had expected a negotiation, a final power play, but he had given her none. He had simply signed the documents, his signature a final, irreversible act of ownership. The room, which had been hers, now felt like his. The weight of the moment was palpable. Aiden stood and extended his hand across the glass table. "It's done, Ms. Dubois," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "The Grand Alpenglow is now a part of Nexus Tech." She looked at his hand, then at his face, her expression a mixture of grudging respect and seething indignation. She had built her career on precision and control, and this man, with his casual attire and audacious confidence, had just upended her world with a single pen stroke. Reluctantly, she took his hand. Her grip was firm and cold. "You are a persistent man, Mr. Thorne," she said, the words a grudging acknowledgement. I still believe this is an incredibly foolish decision, but your tenacity is impressive. When something is worth fighting for, I am, Aiden replied, meeting her gaze directly. He held her hand a moment longer than necessary, a silent message that he was not just taking a hotel, he was taking its history, its brand, and its future. The sound of a panicked voice echoed from the hall. Sir, I apologize, but this man. The door swung open and Matthias, the head of security, rushed in, his face red and out of breath. He stopped short when he saw Aiden and Ms. Du Bois standing together, their hands still clasped. His eyes darted between them, a look of complete and utter confusion on his face. Matthias, Ms. Du Bois said, her voice a low, dangerous tone. What is the meaning of this intrusion? Matthias stammered. I'm sorry, Ms. Du Bois. This man, he's an intruder. He refused to leave yesterday, and he snuck past me today. I radioed for assistance. He trailed off, his gaze falling on the documents on the table, the top one bearing a very large, very official-looking signature from Aiden. Aiden looked at Matthias. He saw the flicker of recognition in the man's eyes, the moment the pieces clicked into place. The man who had turned him away 24 hours ago, the man who had looked at him and seen a stereotype, now saw his new boss. The color drained from Matthias's face. Matthias, Aiden said, his voice devoid of emotion. You can stand down. I'm not an intruder. He turned to Ms. Du Bois. I believe the last piece of business is the transfer of keys and access codes, yes? Ms. Du Bois, recovering her composure, gestured to an assistant who had been silently watching the exchange. Yes, the technicalities will be handled by my team. The building is yours, Mr. Thorne. I wish you the best of luck with your new venture. She said the last words with a hint of sarcasm, a final jab before she retreated from the room. As she left, Aiden turned back to Matthias, who was still standing in the doorway, frozen in a state of shock. Matthias, I have a new job for you, Aiden said. The security guard's heart sank. He knew what was coming. A dismissal, a public shaming, a final, definitive end to his career at the one place he thought he'd always belong. But Aiden's next words surprised him. Effective immediately, you will be reassigned to the security office. You will be in charge of all internal security protocols and systems. You will not be working with guests. I want you to spend the next month doing two things. First, you will conduct a full audit of every security policy and procedure in this hotel. I want to know where they're outdated and where they're based on assumptions, not on logic. Second, you will be in charge of developing and implementing a new diversity training program for the entire security staff. It will be mandatory. I want my employees to know that this hotel is a place for everyone, and their job is to welcome, not to bar. Matthias was speechless. He had been preparing for a firing, for a public humiliation, but instead, he had been given a second chance, a new purpose. It was not a demotion, it was a reevaluation. Aiden wasn't just buying the building. He was buying the people, and he was giving them a chance to change with it. Aiden looked around the opulent suite, the sweeping views of the Alps now his. He felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. He had not just made a point, he had created a path forward. He had shown that the power of a single act could ripple out and change an entire institution. The handshake with Ms. Du Bois had been the end of a long, bitter battle. His conversation with Matthias was the beginning of a new era. He knew his work was just beginning. Aiden didn't just buy the hotel. He bought its reputation, its staff, and its ingrained, decades-old policies. He knew that simply owning the building wasn't enough. The real victory would be in changing its culture from the inside out. He had a vision for the grand Alpenglow, one that transcended its gilded halls and panoramic views. It was a vision of a luxury hotel that was also a place of genuine warmth, inclusivity, and forward-thinking principles. He immediately installed a new management team, a group of diverse and dynamic leaders he had been cultivating for years. At the helm was a woman named Dr. Leena Sharma, a visionary in hospitality management whom he had met at a business conference years ago. She had a PhD in organizational behavior and a reputation for turning traditional institutions into modern, profitable, and equitable spaces. She was a perfect fit. Aiden's first directive to Leena was simple. I don't want to break the grand Alpenglow. I want to make it better. I want to honor its history while creating a new legacy. Lena's first move was to call a mandatory all-staff meeting. The employees, from the bellhops to the senior managers, were a mixture of anxious, curious, and skeptical. They had heard the rumors of the bizarre and sudden acquisition, and they were bracing for the worst: massive layoffs, a rebranding that stripped the hotel of its identity, or a complete corporate overhaul. Lena addressed them with a quiet confidence. "My name is Lena Sharma, and I'm the new manager of the Grand Alpenglow. I want to be very clear with all of you. Your jobs are secure. We are not here to punish you for the past. We are here to build a new future together." She then laid out the new vision. The core of it was a radical reevaluation of what constituted a luxury experience. For Lena and Aiden, true luxury wasn't about exclusivity. It was about genuine hospitality, a sense of belonging, and a personalized experience for every single guest, regardless of their background, attire, or bank account. The first change was a new dress code. The rigid, antiquated rules were replaced with a flexible policy that encouraged guests to dress for their own comfort and style. The staff, however, was put through a new training program. It wasn't just about guest service. It was about unconscious bias. The training, which was run by a group of external consultants, was designed to help staff recognize and overcome their own biases, to treat every person who walked through the door with the same level of respect and dignity. Aiden's own experience served as a powerful case study. He didn't name names, but he told the story of a man who was turned away for his inappropriate attire, and how that single act of judgment had cost the hotel its ownership. He made it clear that such incidents would never happen again under his leadership. The change wasn't easy. Some of the older staff members were resistant. They had been working at the hotel for decades, and the new rules felt like a betrayal of the traditions they held dear. But Lena was patient and firm. She offered one-on-one counseling, additional training, and a new bonus structure that rewarded exceptional, inclusive service. Aiden made one more significant change. The security guard, Matthias, was reassigned to a different location, a less public-facing one. It wasn't a firing, but it was a clear message. The man who had acted as the gatekeeper was no longer in a position of power over guests. He was still a part of the team, but his role was now focused on internal systems, a chance for him to learn and grow in a new, less biased environment. Word of the changes began to leak out. Initially, the media was skeptical, labeling it a woke corporate PR stunt. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the narrative began to shift. Travel writers and influencers who visited the hotel began to rave about the new atmosphere. They spoke of a warmth and a genuine friendliness that was often missing in other luxury establishments. Guests from all walks of life, families with children, young couples, and business travelers, began to frequent the hotel, drawn by its new reputation as a truly welcoming space. Aiden, though, was rarely there. He had made his point. He knew his presence wasn't what was important. It was the change he had ignited. He had started a fire of transformation, and he had put the right people in place to make sure it burned bright. The hotel was no longer just a building. It was a living, breathing testament to a new kind of power, the power of inclusivity and change. He had turned a moment of personal humiliation into a moment of global transformation, and he knew that his work was just beginning. The Grand Alpenglow never officially closed its doors for a reopening. Instead, the transformation was a gradual, living process. The changes rippled through the hotel's operations, staff, and atmosphere, creating a new kind of luxury that was more about feeling than about formality. The word of mouth began to spread, not just in the hushed tones of high society, but in the vibrant, digital echo chambers of social media and travel blogs. The headlines went from Tech CEO buys Swiss landmark to the Alpenglow revolution. Journalists who had initially dismissed the acquisition as a PR stunt were now sending their best writers to the hotel to report on the palpable shift in its culture. One prominent travel critic wrote a glowing review, noting, "The Grand Alpenglow has shed its stuffy, exclusive skin. It feels less like a fortress and more like a home. The staff doesn't just serve you, they welcome you. This isn't just a hotel, it's an experience in genuine hospitality." Aiden's vision, executed flawlessly by Lena Sharma and her team, was a resounding success. They had done more than just change the rules, they had changed the narrative. The hotel became a new symbol of inclusive luxury. The staff, now more diverse and welcoming than ever, began receiving rave reviews. The new dress code was a hit, drawing in a younger, more dynamic clientele who appreciated the freedom to express their own style. People came from all over the world, not just for the stunning views and five-star amenities, but for the unique, welcoming atmosphere. The Grand Alpenglow became a case study in conscious business. Business schools began to analyze the acquisition, not for its financial metrics, but for its ethical and social implications. They studied how a single act of defiance, fueled by personal experience, could be turned into a profitable and transformative business model. Aiden was invited to speak at conferences, but he politely declined. He was not interested in being a public figure in the hospitality industry. His work was done. He had set the wheels of change in motion, and he trusted the people he had put in charge to keep them turning. Aiden, though, was rarely there. His focus remained on Nexus Tech, the company he had built from the ground up. The hotel was not his passion. It was a passion project, a statement, and a promise. He had proven his point. He had shown that the power of capital could be used for good, that a private wrong could be righted on a very public stage. He knew his presence wasn't what was important. It was the change he had ignited. He had created a new kind of legacy for the hotel, one that was built not on exclusion, but on the very principles of his own life. Hard work, perseverance, and the unwavering belief that everyone deserves a seat at the table. He received regular updates from Lena. She would send him pictures of the bustling lobby, filled with people of all ages and ethnicities, laughing and enjoying their time. She would forward him guest reviews, each one a testament to the success of their new approach. She told him about the staff, who now felt a sense of pride and ownership in their work, who were no longer gatekeepers but hosts. The Grand Alpenglow became more than just a hotel. It became a destination for those who sought a different kind of luxury, one that was built on genuine connection and a sense of belonging. Aiden had not just bought a building. He had bought a piece of the future, and he had made it a better, more equitable place for everyone. The Grand Alpenglow was reborn, and its new story was just beginning. A year had passed since Aiden signed the papers and bought the Grand Alpenglow. The building had been transformed from a symbol of old-world exclusivity into a beacon of modern, inclusive luxury. The news cycle had long since moved on, but the story of the hotel's revival had become a permanent part of its new identity. Aiden, the architect of this change, had not set foot inside since the day of the sale. He felt no need to. He had proven his point, and he trusted Lena and her team to carry the torch. But one crisp autumn afternoon, a year to the day of his return, a quiet impulse led him back. He didn't announce his arrival. He simply told his driver to take him to the hotel. He didn't want a grand reception or a tour. He wanted to see the truth of the change with his own eyes. He stepped out of the car, the same model as the one he had been in a year before. The air was cool and smelled of fresh-cut grass and rain. He was dressed, once again, in jeans and a simple black sweater. As he approached the entrance, he felt a flicker of the old indignation, a memory of the wall that had stood between him and this place. But as he got closer, he saw a different face. The security guard was a woman with a kind smile and a posture that was welcoming, not rigid. She saw him approaching, and her smile widened. She didn't stop him, didn't question his attire. Instead, she opened the door and offered a warm greeting. "Welcome to the Grand Alpenglow, sir. We're happy to have you." Aiden's heart swelled. He smiled back, a genuine, joyful smile that reached his eyes. "Thank you," he said. He looked around the lobby, and the transformation was immediate and profound. The hush of old money and stiff formality was gone, replaced by a vibrant energy. Families with children were laughing by a roaring fireplace. A young couple was taking a selfie by the grand staircase. People of all ages, races, and ethnicities were milling about, a beautiful tapestry of humanity that had replaced the monochromatic canvas of the past. He walked to the front desk. A young concierge, a woman with bright eyes and a cheerful demeanor, greeted him. "How can I help you, sir?" "I don't have a reservation," Aiden said, "but I was hoping for a room." He was testing them, putting them through the very paces he had failed a year ago. "Not a problem at all," she said, her smile never wavering. She looked at his name. "Ah, Mr. Thorne, we have an excellent suite available for you. Would you like a room with a mountain view or a valley view?" She had recognized his name. He was no longer just a person with inappropriate attire. He was Mr. Thorne, a valued guest, and a person who belonged. He took the key card and walked toward the elevators, the same ones Matthias had tried to bar him from. He got in and rode to his suite, the sense of victory a quiet hum in his chest. Inside the suite, he went to the window and looked out at the stunning view of the Alps. The mountains were still the same, majestic and unyielding. But the hotel was different. He had not changed the mountains, but he had changed the way people saw them. He had shown that beauty and luxury were not defined by exclusivity, but by the people who shared in them. Aiden took out his phone and sent a short text to Lena. "You did it," it read. He got a reply almost immediately. "No, we did it. You showed us the way, boss." Aiden sat on the edge of the bed and felt a deep sense of peace. He had spent his life building a company that connected people, that broke down digital barriers. And now, he had used that success to break down a physical one. He had bought a building, but he had won something far more valuable, a principle. He knew he had finally found a place where he truly belonged, not because he owned it, but because it had finally become a place that welcomed everyone.